The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 12 alien species sat in their seats watching the small human delegation standing at the lowest platform. For 300 years, humans had been coming to this place, asking for things and being told no. Ambassador Daniel Morris looked around the room. He saw the Valanthia, tall insect creatures with sharp mandibles and cold black eyes. He saw the Moravians, beings made of living crystal that glowed with soft light. He saw the Kathrani, snake-like creatures who whispered to each other in their hissing language, and he saw many others. All of them looking down at the humans like they were looking at insects. The Valanthi High Speaker stood up. His name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce, so humans simply called him the Speaker. He clicked his mandibles together, a sound that meant he was pleased with himself. The Council has reviewed humanity's request to establish colonies in the Orion Reach sector, the Speaker said. The request is denied. Humans are not ready for expansion. You are too young, too violent, and too unpredictable. This is our final decision. Daniel felt something break inside him. Not his spirit, but his patience. He had been the human ambassador for 15 years. Before him, there had been dozens of others. And every single one of them had heard the same words. Not ready. Too young, too dangerous. He looked back at his team. Katie Sullivan, his young aide with red hair and tired eyes, gave him a small nod. Admiral Christopher Grant, a man with gray hair and a face that had seen too many battles, crossed his arms. Dr. Linda Patterson, a brilliant scientist whose work had been rejected by the Council 17 times, simply stared at the floor. Daniel turned back to face the Council. He took a deep breath. Humanity accepts this decision, he said. The Speaker's antennae twitched with satisfaction. Around the room, alien delegates relaxed. This was how it always went. The humans complained. The Council said no, and the humans accepted it. But Daniel was not finished, and humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the room exploded into chaos. The Moravians pulsed with bright, angry colors. The Kathrani rose up on their tails, hissing loudly. The massive Drolith, ancient creatures, who rarely moved at all, shifted their enormous bodies. Everywhere, aliens were shouting, clicking, hissing, and flashing. The Speaker raised his forearms for silence. It took several minutes for the room to calm down. You cannot leave, the Speaker said. His voice was no longer smug. Now it was sharp and dangerous. There are treaties. There are obligations. There are thousands of years of tradition. Treaties that benefit only you, Daniel replied. Obligations that we must follow while you ignore yours. Traditions that keep us small and weak while you grow strong. We protect you, the Speaker hissed. Without the Council, your species would have been destroyed long ago. Admiral Grant stepped forward. He was not a diplomat. He was a soldier. And soldiers spoke plainly. Protection, Grant said. Let me tell you about your protection. 12 years ago, Kathrani raiders attacked 3 human mining colonies in the Vega system. 400 humans died. We asked the Council for help. You called it a misunderstanding. The Kathrani delegation shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. 8 years ago, Grant continued, Moravian ships blockaded our trade routes for 6 months. Our people starved. We asked the Council to intervene. You called it an administrative error. The Moravians pulsed with dim, embarrassed light.
3 years ago,
Dr. Patterson developed a treatment that could cure the Valanthia plague that was killing millions of your people. Grant pointed at the Speaker. Your people. She offered to share it freely. Your science committee classified it as dangerous innovation and destroyed her research. The Speaker's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of anger. That research was primitive and untested. We could not risk 3 million Valanthia died while you debated, Dr. Patterson said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken. I watched the death counts every day. I could have saved them. Silence fell over the hall. Daniel gathered his materials from the small human desk. We joined this council 300 years ago because we believed in cooperation. We believed that different species could work together for the good of all. We stayed because we hoped that one day you would see us as equals. He looked around the room one last time. We were wrong. You never wanted partners. You wanted servants? You wanted a species you could control, a species you could use when convenient and ignore when not. If you leave, the speaker said slowly, you will have no protection, no trade agreements, no access to council space. You will be alone in a hostile universe. We have always been alone, Daniel replied. The only difference is that now we admit it. The human delegation walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the silent hall. No one tried to stop them. No one said goodbye. At the door, Katie Sullivan paused and looked back. She was young, only 28 years old. She had grown up believing that the council was wise and fair. She had spent 5 years learning that it was neither. You know what the saddest part is? She said, we actually liked you. We wanted to be your friends. We came to this galaxy with hope and curiosity and a desire to learn. And you spent 300 years teaching us that hope was foolish. She turned and walked out. In the corridor outside, the human delegation moved quickly toward their shuttle. They did not speak. There was nothing to say. Everything had been said. Admiral Grant walked beside Daniel. They will come after us, he said quietly. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually, they will decide that they cannot allow us to exist outside their control. Daniel nodded. I know. Will we be ready? Daniel stopped walking. He looked at his team, these tired, angry, determined people who had just done something that no one had ever done before. They had told the most powerful organization in the galaxy that they were no longer afraid. We will be ready, he said, because we have no other choice. Shuttle took them away from the council station. Through the windows, they watched it grow smaller. A massive structure of crystal and metal that had dominated galactic politics for 10,000 years. Katie sat beside Daniel. What happens now, sir? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Now we find out who we really are. For 300 years we have been told what we cannot do. We have been told where we cannot go. We have been told what we cannot become. He looked at her, and for the first time in years there was something like hope in his eyes. Now we have no limits except the ones we choose. And I choose none. The shuttle jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving council space behind forever. In the Great Hall, the alien delegates argued about what had just happened and what it meant. None of them understood. None of them could imagine what was coming. Humanity had been set free, and the universe would never be the same. 5 years passed after the humans left the council. To most of the galaxy, it was as if humanity had simply vanished. The great powers continued their business, trading and arguing and making deals as they always had. Sometimes someone would mention the humans, and everyone would laugh. Poor, foolish creatures, they said. They must be dying out there in the dark. Alone and forgotten. They were wrong. On Mars, in a laboratory hidden deep beneath the red surface, Dr. Linda Patterson stood before a machine that should not exist. The slipstream drive, her team called it. A way to fold space itself, to travel distances that would take normal ships. Months in just hours. The council's greatest scientists had said such a thing was impossible. They had written long papers explaining why it could never work. They had laughed at humans who suggested otherwise. But the council's scientists had never been desperate. They had never been told that their survival depended on doing the impossible. They had never had to fight for every tiny advantage. Final test sequence ready, said Dr. Samuel Wright, Linda's oldest colleague. His hands were shaking. They had worked on this project for 4 years, in secret, with limited resources. If it failed, they would have nothing. Linda nodded. Begin. The machine hummed. Energy readings spiked on every monitor. The air itself seemed to vibrate. And then, in the center of the test chamber, space twisted. A hole appeared, showing stars that were thousands of light years away. Samuel fell to his knees. Tears ran down his face. It works, he whispered. Linda, it works. Linda stood very still. She thought about all the council scientists who had called her primitive. She thought about the research they had destroyed, the treatments they had rejected, the ideas they had mocked. Send word to Admiral Grant, she said quietly. Tell him we're ready. Far away, in the shipyards orbiting Earth's moon, Admiral Grant received the message. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Then he allowed himself a small smile. The first real smile he had shown in years. He walked through the shipyard, past hundreds of workers who were building things the galaxy had never seen. Human ships did not look like council ships. They were not elegant or beautiful. They were practical, tough, designed by people who knew that survival mattered more than appearance. How many are ready? Grant asked Commander Marcus Cole, the man in charge of the shipyard. 47 combat vessels, Marcus replied. 60 transport ships, 200 support craft, and we have 18 more combat vessels in final assembly. Crew training? Everyone has completed basic qualifications. The advanced teams are exceeding all expectations. Marcus paused. Sir, I have to tell you, these people are different. They train harder than anyone I've ever seen. They study longer. They push themselves further. It's like they're not just preparing for war. They're preparing for everything. Grant nodded. He understood. When you spent 300 years being told you were inferior, being told you would never be good enough, you developed a hunger that nothing could satisfy. Every human in the fleet carried that hunger. It drove them forward when others would have quit. Keep up the good work, Grant said. We're going to need every ship and every trained crew member. On a small station orbiting Neptune, Daniel Morris met with leaders from every human colony. He was no longer called ambassador. That title belonged to his old life, to the time when humans begged for scraps from the council's table. Now people simply called him Daniel, and that was enough. The meeting room was crowded. Representatives had come from Earth, Mars, the Moon, Europa, Titan, and a dozen smaller settlements. They had also come from places that officially did not exist. Report from the Orion Reach, said Maria Santos, a tall woman with dark hair and serious eyes. She had been the first human to set foot on a planet in the Forbidden Sector 5 years ago when such an act could have started a war. 17 colonies established, Maria continued. Total population of 200,000. Agricultural production exceeds our needs. Mining operations are running at full capacity. The new settlements are completely self-sufficient. Murmurs ran through the room. This was extraordinary. The council had told humans they could not survive without protection. The council had said humans were not capable of building new worlds. The council had been wrong about everything. Katie Sullivan stood up. She was no longer a young aide. Now she was Director of External Relations, responsible for managing humanity's secret contacts with the outside galaxy. Intelligence report, she said. The council believes we are struggling. Their spies tell them our economy is failing, our population is declining, and our technology is stagnating. Our spies tell them that, Daniel clarified with a slight smile. Katie nodded. We have been feeding false information to Council intelligence for 3 years. They think we are desperate. They think we are weak. They have no idea what we have built. An older man named Frank Cooper raised his hand. He was a civilian, a former factory worker who now managed supply chains for the entire human fleet. How long can we keep this secret? Frank asked. Eventually they'll notice the colonies. Eventually they'll detect our ships. What happens then? Daniel stood up and walked to the window. Outside he could see the vast blackness of space, dotted with stars that had once seemed impossibly far away. Now those stars held human children, human families, human hopes. When I was young, Daniel said slowly, my grandmother told me a story. She said that when humans first went to space, everyone told them it was impossible. The distances were too great. The challenges were too hard. Humans were too fragile. He turned back to face the room. But humans went anyway. Not because it was easy, but because it was hard. Not because we knew we would succeed, but because we refused to accept failure. The council will come for us, he continued. Maybe next year. Maybe in 5 years. But they will come. They cannot allow us to exist as proof that their rules were wrong, that their system was unjust, that their galaxy could be different. And when they come, Maria asked, when they come, we will show them what 300 years of oppression created. not broken servants, not defeated beggars. We will show them something they never imagined possible. He looked around the room at these people who had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and never given up hope. We will show them humans. The meeting continued for several more hours. Plans were reviewed, resources were allocated, and decisions were made. When it was over, the representatives returned to their ships and their colonies, carrying with them the knowledge that everything was about to change. That night, Daniel sat alone in his quarters, looking at old photographs. Pictures of his parents, who had died hoping their son would see a better future. Pictures of colleagues who had spent their lives fighting for recognition that never came. Pictures of children who had grown up believing the Council's lies about human inferiority. Katie found him there, staring at the images. "Are you all right?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I've spent my whole life asking the Council for permission. Permission to expand. Permission to grow. Permission to exist." He set down the photographs. "I'm tired of asking." "Then stop asking," Katie said simply. "We don't need their permission anymore." Daniel nodded slowly. She was right. They had spent 300 years waiting for the galaxy to accept them. Now they would show the galaxy that acceptance was not necessary. Humans would build their own place among the stars. And anyone who tried to stop them would learn a very hard lesson. The universe was about to discover what humanity could do. When no one was holding them back, the Moravian patrol fleet was bored. They had been guarding this empty sector of space for 3 months, and nothing interesting had ever happened. The 3 crystalline cruisers drifted lazily through the darkness, their crews counting the days until they could return home. Commander Prism Light, a Moravian whose body glowed with soft blue colors, was reviewing duty reports when the alarm sounded. His form immediately shifted to sharp yellow, the color of surprise. "Report," he demanded. "Unknown vessel detected," his sensor officer replied. "It just appeared on our screens. No jump signature. No warning. It's simply there." Prism Light moved to the main display. A single ship hung in space ahead of them, unlike anything in Council records. It was angular, practical, and covered with strange markings. "Human," his tactical officer said with disgust. "Look at the writing on the hull. That's human script." Prism Light's colors darkened to orange, the shade of contempt. A human ship in Council space. How amusing. They must be lost refugees, fleeing from whatever remains of their pathetic civilization. He opened a communication channel. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Council territory. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." The response came from a young woman's voice, calm and clear. "Moravian Patrol. This is Captain Nicole Harper of the Starship Endeavor. We are passing through this sector on our way to open trade negotiations with the Draelith. Please move aside." Prism Light flashed bright red, the color of anger. No one spoke to a Moravian commander that way. No one. "You will address me with proper respect," he hissed. "Humans have no right to travel in Council space. You have no right to contact the Draelith. You have no rights at all. Surrender immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Captain Harper replied. "We have important business to conduct. Now, I've asked politely. Please move your ships." Prism Light turned to his weapons officer. "Target that vessel. Destroy it." On the bridge of the Endeavor, Nicole Harper watched the Moravian ships power up their weapons. She was 29 years old, the youngest captain in the human fleet. She had been chosen for this mission because she was calm under pressure and could think faster than anyone else Admiral Grant had ever met. "They're charging weapons," reported Peter Blake, her tactical officer. He was a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, but even he seemed tense. 3 cruisers. "All targeting us. Their shield configuration?" Nicole asked. "Standard Moravian pattern. Full coverage. Strongest at the front. They expect us to either run or surrender." Nicole smiled slightly. "They expect a lot of things." Helm. Execute Maneuver 7. The pilot, a young woman named Christine Park, entered the commands. "Maneuver 7. Aye. What happened next would be remembered for centuries. The Endeavor's engines flared with energy that the Moravians had never seen before. The ship seemed to blur, splitting into multiple images that danced across their sensors. The Moravian targeting systems went haywire, unable to lock onto anything solid. "What is happening?" Prism Light demanded. His colors were flashing wildly now, cycling through confusion, fear, and disbelief. "I don't know," his tactical officer admitted. "The human ship is everywhere and nowhere. Our weapons cannot." The Moravian cruiser shuddered as something struck it. Lights flickered. Systems failed. The ship began to drift. "Engine room reports propulsion is offline," someone shouted. "We've been hit, but I don't know how. Our shields never even registered an impact." Prism Light watched helplessly as the same thing happened to his other two ships. One moment, they were preparing to destroy a single enemy. The next moment, all three cruisers were disabled. Drifting in space like broken toys, the Endeavor reappeared directly in front of them, completely undamaged. Captain Harper's voice came through the communication system again. "Commander, your ships have been disabled. Your crews are unharmed. Your life support is functioning. Rescue vessels will arrive within 6 hours." "This is impossible," Prism Light whispered. His colors had faded to pale gray, the shade of shock. "How did you do this? What technology is this?" "It's human technology," Nicole replied. "Built by humans, for humans, without anyone's permission. I suggest you remember that when you make your report to the Council. The Council will destroy you for this," Prism Light said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He was looking at the evidence in front of him. 3 Council warships, defeated by a single human vessel without a single casualty. "Maybe they'll try," Nicole agreed. "But I think you should tell them something first. Tell them we're not the same humans they dismissed 5 years ago. Tell them we've been working very hard while they weren't paying attention. Tell them that everything they believed about us was wrong." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was harder. "And tell them that we don't want war. We never did. All we ever wanted was to be treated fairly. But if they come for us, we will be ready. Endeavor out." The communication ended. The Endeavor turned and accelerated away, disappearing into the stars. Prism Light floated in the darkness for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. He had served in the Moravian fleet for 40 years. He had fought in 3 wars. He had never, not once, seen anything like this. When rescue ships finally arrived, he gave his report. It spread through the Council within hours. Emergency meetings were called. Ambassadors argued. Military commanders demanded action, but it was the Dralith who responded first. The ancient species had watched the Council for 10,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had seen countless young species crushed by older, stronger powers. They had never seen a young species fight back like this. The Dralith sent a message to human space. "We will hear your trade proposals." When the message reached Earth, people celebrated in the streets. For 300 years, humans had been the lowest species in the galaxy. Now, for the first time, someone was willing to talk to them as equals. Admiral Grant read the message with satisfaction. The plan was working. The Dralith Trade Agreement would give humanity access to resources and technology that would make them even stronger. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Council would not accept what had happened. The old powers would not allow a young species to challenge their dominance. War was coming. Everyone knew it. Captain Harper returned to Earth, a hero. She stood before Admiral Grant and gave her report, describing every detail of the encounter. When she finished, Grant was quiet for a long moment.
"You could have destroyed those ships," he finally said.
"Our weapons are capable of it. Why didn't you?" Nicole thought about the question carefully. "Because that's what they expected, sir. That's what they've always said about us. That we're violent. That we're dangerous. That we can't be trusted." She looked at the old admiral with steady eyes. "I wanted to show them something different. I wanted to show them that we're better than they think. We don't need to destroy our enemies to defeat them. We just need to show them that they can't destroy us." Grant nodded slowly. He had been a soldier his entire life. He had learned to think in terms of victory and defeat, kill counts and casualty reports. But this young captain was showing him another way. "You did well," he said. "The whole fleet will learn from what you did today." Nicole saluted and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Sir, do you really think we can win? Against the entire council?" Grant considered the question. He thought about everything humanity had built in 5 years. The ships, the weapons, the colonies, the determination. "I don't know if we can win," he admitted. "But I know we won't lose. Not anymore. Not ever again." Nicole nodded and walked out into the corridor where her crew was waiting. They had done something impossible today. Tomorrow they would do it again, and the day after. That in, every day, until the universe understood that humanity was here to stay. The council fleet, gathered at the edge of human space, was the largest military force assembled. In 3,000 years, 200 warships from 6 different species, led by the Valanthi flagship Eternal Mandate, prepared for what the High Speaker called necessary correction. On Earth, people watched the news with fear in their hearts. The enemy fleet was enormous. Every screen showed the same images: Valanthi dreadnoughts with weapons that could crack planets, Moravian cruisers glowing with deadly energy, Kathrani destroyers built for speed and violence. 60 human ships moved to meet them. Admiral Christopher Grant stood on the bridge of the flagship Constellation, the largest vessel humanity had ever built. It was still smaller than most Council warships. It was still outnumbered more than 3 to 1. But Grant had been a soldier for 40 years, and he knew that numbers were not everything. "Status report," he said calmly. Commander Grace Mitchell studied her tactical display. All ships in position. Crews at battle stations. Weapons charged and ready. Katie Sullivan stood beside the Admiral. She had requested permission to be present for this battle. She needed to see it, needed to witness what humanity had become. "They're forming a standard suppression pattern," Grace reported. "Heavy ships in the center, fast attack vessels on the flanks. They're expecting us to either surrender or try to escape." Grant nodded. "Standard Council thinking. Follow the rules. Do what has always been done." He allowed himself a small smile. "They've never fought humans before." "Not really." The communication officer spoke up. "Sir, the Valanthia flagship is transmitting. The High Speaker wishes to address you. Put him through." The main screen flickered, and the High Speaker appeared. His insect face showed no emotion that humans could read, but his mandibles clicked rapidly with what might have been excitement or hunger. "Admiral Grant," the speaker said, "you have one opportunity to surrender. Your species has violated countless laws. You have attacked council vessels. You have established illegal colonies. You have traded with protected species. The punishment for these crimes is severe." "What punishment would that be?" Grant asked. "Your colonies will be destroyed. Your ships will be dismantled. Your population will be relocated to designated reservation worlds where you will live under permanent supervision." The speaker's mandibles clicked faster. "This is mercy. You should be grateful." Grant was quiet for a moment. He thought about his parents, who had worked their entire lives in council-approved factories, making products that benefited alien species while their own children went hungry. He thought about his brother, who had been killed when Kathrani raiders attacked a human mining colony, a death that the council had called an acceptable loss. He thought about 300 years of humiliation, rejection, and contempt. "No," he said simply. The speaker seemed confused. "No, you refuse mercy." "I refuse to call slavery mercy," Grant replied. "I refuse to call the destruction of my people justice. I refuse to accept that the universe belongs only to those who happen to reach the stars before us." He stood taller, his voice growing stronger. "We came to your council hoping to be partners. We stayed hoping to be equals. We left when we understood that you would never see us as either. And now you come to our space with your great fleet, thinking you can force us back into our place." Grant leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You're about to learn something important. We don't have a place. Not anymore. We make our own place. And anyone who tries to take it from us will regret it." The speaker made a sound that might have been laughter, Brave words from a dying species. Let us see if your ships are as impressive as your speeches. The transmission ended. Across the void, the Council fleet began to advance. Then something unexpected happened. Sir Grace said urgently, "Several Council ships are breaking formation. They're moving away from the main fleet." Grant watched the display. 12 vessels, including 4 Dralith cruisers, 3 Moravian frigates, and 5 Kathrani scouts, had separated from the attack force. They were not fleeing. They were simply moving to the side, taking neutral positions. A message arrived from the lead Dralith ship. The captain, an ancient being called Eldest Voice, spoke slowly and deliberately. "We have watched the Council for 10,000 years, Eldest Voice said. We have seen young species crushed for the crime of being young. We have seen potential destroyed for the crime of being different. We have said nothing because we believed the alternative was chaos." The old creature paused. "But today, we have decided that there are worse things than chaos. There is injustice. There is cruelty. There is the murder of hope." More ships began to break away from the Council fleet. Moravians whose commanders remembered the medical research that could have saved Velawanthe lives. Kathrani who had grown tired of being the Council's attack dogs. Even a few Valanthi vessels whose crews had begun to question their leaders. Within an hour, the Council fleet had lost nearly a quarter of its strength. Not to combat. To conscience, the High Speaker's voice screamed across all frequencies, demanding loyalty, threatening punishment. But the departing ships did not turn back. "Admiral Grant," Eldest Voice transmitted, "we do not stand with humanity today, but we will not stand against those who have done us no harm while our allies burned their colonies and mocked their suffering. This is the only statement we can make." Grant bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. "Thank you. That statement is enough." The defecting ships took positions far from the battle, silent witnesses to Watoa. At would come next. The remaining Council fleet, still overwhelming in its firepower, resumed its advance. The High Speaker, humiliated by the defections, ordered an immediate attack. "All ships," Grant commanded. "Execute Battle Plan Omega." What followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. Human ships did not fight like Council vessels. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They moved in coordinated chaos, attacking and retreating, appearing where they were not expected, disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Valanthi fired their massive weapons at targets that were no longer there. The Moravians found their shields useless against attacks that came from impossible angles. The Kathrani, famous for their speed, discovered that human ships were faster in the midst of the battle. Katie Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Constellation and watched humanity prove everything the Council had ever believed wrong. These were the primitive creatures who could not be trusted. With technology, these were the violent savages who would destroy themselves without supervision. These were the inferior beings who needed to be controlled for their own good. They were winning, not easily. Human ships took damage. Some were destroyed. Crews died. But for every human vessel lost, 3 Council ships were disabled or driven back. 6 hours after the battle began, it was over. The Council fleet was crippled. Half their ships were drifting wreckage. The other half were retreating as fast as their engines could carry them. The Eternal Mandate itself was dead in space, its weapons silent. Its crew abandoning ship. The High Speaker was not among those who escaped. No one knew if he had died in the battle or simply refused to face the consequences of his failure. Either way, he was gone. And with him went 3,000 years of certainty about how the universe worked. Admiral Grant opened a channel that broadcast to every ship in the area, Council and human alike. "This battle is over," he said. "Your wounded will be recovered. Your survivors will be returned to Council space. We will not pursue. We will not seek revenge. We will not become what you always said we were." He paused, looking at the debris field that had once been the greatest military force in known history. "But we will remember, and we will never again ask permission to exist. The next time anyone threatens humanity, remember this day. Remember what we did when we had no choice, and know that we will do it again if we must." The transmission ended. Across the human fleet, exhausted crews allowed themselves to celebrate. They had survived. They had won. They had done the impossible. Katie Sullivan found Admiral Grant standing alone, looking out at the stars. "We did it," she said softly. Grant nodded, but his face was tired and sad. "We did, and now everything changes. The old order is broken. The Council will never be the same. Half the galaxy will see us as heroes. The other half will see us as monsters." "What do you see?" Katie asked. Grant was quiet for a long time. "I see people who were pushed until they pushed back. I see a species that refused to accept the fate others chose for them. I see humanity." He turned to look at her, and there was something like hope in his eyes. "And I see a future. For the first time in 300 years, I actually see a future." The human fleet gathered its wounded and began the long journey home. Behind them, the wreckage of the Council fleet slowly dispersed into the void. A new era had begun. 1 year after the Great Battle, the galaxy looked very different. The Galactic Council still existed, but it had been transformed beyond recognition. The Volanthi High Speaker had been replaced by a coalition. Government that included species who had never before been allowed to speak. The old hierarchies, the ancient rules, the traditions that had kept powerful species in control for thousands of years, all of it was crumbling. Humanity had not asked for a seat at the new council table. Instead, they had built their own table and invited anyone who wished to join. On a space station at the edge of known space, Ambassador Daniel Morris sat in a garden filled with plants from a dozen worlds. He was old now, his hair completely gray, his face lined with the marks of a difficult life. But his eyes were still sharp, still curious, still hopeful. Across from him sat Eldest Voice, the Draelith captain, who had refused to fight against humanity at the border. The ancient creature moved slowly, as all Draelith did, but there was respect in the way it looked at the human. "Your species continues to puzzle me," Eldest Voice said in its deep, rumbling voice. "You live such brief lives. You fight among yourselves constantly. You make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. And yet you have changed everything." Daniel smiled slightly. "Maybe that's exactly why we could change things. We don't have time to wait for perfect solutions. We don't have centuries to debate every decision. We have to act quickly, take risks, make mistakes, and learn from them. The old powers fear you now. They should. Not because we plan to attack them. Not because we want revenge for how they treated us. They should fear us because we've shown everyone else that the old rules don't have to apply forever. We've proven that a young species can stand up to older ones and survive. We've demonstrated that oppression is not inevitable." Elda's voice considered this for a long moment. "Many young species are watching you. Many are wondering if they should follow your example." "Good," Daniel said. "That's exactly what we want. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where no one is dismissed because they're young or different or weak. That's the future we're trying to build." In the Orion Reach, the forbidden sector that humans had colonized against all council laws, life was flourishing. 23 colonies now dotted the region, with a combined population of nearly 500,000 people. New cities rose on worlds that had been declared off-limits for centuries. Children grew up under alien suns, playing in parks and going to schools where they learned that anything was possible. Maria Santos, now governor of the entire region, walked through the streets of the largest colony, watching families go about their daily lives. She remembered the early days, when every colonist knew they might be discovered and destroyed at any moment. She remembered the fear, the secrecy, the constant vigilance. Now children laughed and played without fear. Merchants sold goods from across the galaxy. Artists created works that blended human traditions with alien influences. Scientists pursued research that had been forbidden under council rules. Governor Santos, a young man, approached her, carrying a datapad. His name was Lucas Graham, and he was her chief of staff. "The trade delegation from Moravian space has arrived. They're requesting a meeting," Maria nodded. This was the 4th Moravian delegation in 3 months. The crystalline species that had once blockaded human trade routes was now desperate to establish commerce with humanity. Their economy was struggling without access to human goods and technology. The universe had turned upside down. Schedule them for tomorrow morning, she said. And remind them that we negotiate as equals now. If they want something from us, they'll need to offer something in return. In a classroom on Earth, a young teacher named Sophie Martinez was explaining history to her students. They were 8 years old, born after the departure from the Council. Born into a world where humans were no longer second-class citizens of the galaxy. Before I was born, Sophie said, humans had to ask permission for everything. We couldn't build colonies without Council approval. We couldn't develop new technology without Council oversight. We couldn't even travel to certain parts of space without Council escorts. A girl in the front row raised her hand. Why did we let them treat us that way? Sophie thought carefully about her answer. Because we were afraid. We were small and weak, and the Council was large and powerful. We thought that if we just followed the rules, if we just worked hard and proved ourselves, eventually they would accept us. But they never did. A boy in the back said. No, they never did. So one day, a very brave ambassador decided to stop asking for permission. He walked out of the Council chamber and told them that humanity would find its own way. And then we built the fleet and won the war, another student said excitedly. Sophie smiled. Yes, but that's not the most important part. The most important part is what we did after. We didn't become like them. We didn't create our own empire to oppress other species. We built something different. We built a place where everyone is welcome, where no one has to beg for the right to exist. She looked around at her students. These children who would never know what it was like to be considered inferior, who would grow up believing they could do anything. You are the future, she told them. You will decide what kind of galaxy we live in. I hope you choose to be kind, to be fair, and to never forget that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. Now serving as a training vessel for new officers, Admiral Grant gave his final address before retirement. The ship's auditorium was packed with young men and women from every human colony, eager to serve in the fleet that had saved their species. I've been a soldier for 50 years, Grant said, his voice still strong despite his age. I've seen the worst of what people can do to each other. I've seen friends die for causes that seemed hopeless. I've made decisions that cost lives and decisions that saved them. He paused, looking out at the young faces before him. But I've also seen something I never expected to see. I've seen humanity rise from nothing to become a power that the galaxy respects. Not through cruelty or conquest, but through determination, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept limits that others tried to place on us. Some of you will negotiate treaties. Some of you will explore unknown space. Whatever you do, remember why we fight. Not for glory, not for revenge, not for power. We fight so that no one ever has to feel the way we felt for 300 years. Alone, unwanted, worthless. He straightened his uniform. The same uniform he had worn for 5 decades.
Right!
You are the future of humanity. I am proud to have served alongside your parents. I am proud to have helped build the foundation on which you will stand. Now go out there and make us even prouder. The applause was deafening that night. Daniel Morris stood on a balcony on the Neptune station, looking out at the stars. Katie Sullivan, now his closest friend, after years of working together, stood beside him. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't left? She asked. Daniel nodded slowly. Sometimes we would have continued begging for scraps. Our children would have grown up believing they were inferior. Eventually, we would have faded away, another forgotten species crushed by the weight of an unjust system. And now? Daniel smiled, the same tired but hopeful smile he had shown 6 years ago when humanity walked out of the council chamber. Now we have a future. Not a perfect one. There will be more challenges, more enemies, more difficult choices, but it will be our future. Not one given to us by others. Not one defined by rules we had no part in making. Ours. He looked at Katie. That's all I ever wanted. A chance for humanity to find out what we could become without anyone holding us back. Katie followed his gaze to the stars. Out there, human ships carried human explorers to the edges of known space. Human scientists studied mysteries that had puzzled the galaxy for millennia. Human artists created works that moved species who had never even heard of Earth, and everywhere other young species watched and wondered. If the humans could do it, perhaps they could too. Perhaps the old order was not as permanent as it seemed. Perhaps the universe was bigger and more welcoming than they had been taught to believe. The day humans left the council, the universe changed forever. But it was not the leaving that mattered. It was not the battle, or the victory, or the treaties that followed. What mattered was the example. What mattered was the proof that hope was not foolish, that dreams were not impossible, that even the smallest species could change the course of history. What mattered was the simple truth that Daniel Morris had learned in the darkest moments of humanity's struggle. No one is too small to matter. No one is too weak to fight. And no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to decide another's future. The stars burned bright in the endless darkness, and humanity, at last, burned with them.